Today we're going to look at how we can pause, quit, restart, or reset a level in Unreal Engine, as these can be essential features for any game. I've created a third-person game project so that we can showcase these features. If we go to our main character, which is a copy of the third-person character, I've created an input action called IA pause. And in Unreal, there is a simple node that allows you to set the game to be paused or not, and it's called set game paused. So what we can do is from the started, we can just do a flip-flop and then put both of them into the set game paused node and put this as the value. If we go back to our game and play it, everything will start as normal, and when I press P, the whole game will pause. And I've got no control. However, I press P again, it will not unpause. And the reason for that is, if we go and look at our input action pause, one of the options available is trigger when paused. So this will determine whether or not this will be triggered when the game is actually paused. If we press that to true, save it and go back, and now when the game plays and I pause it, I can then unpause it just by pressing the same key again. So it will trigger even when the simulation and the game are paused. And the pause will apply to everything including physics. So that can be a very simple way of pausing your game and unpausing it. However, when we pause our game, we will often want to show a menu to the player. Something like this, where there is an option to quit, restart, reset, or unpause the game and return to it. In order to show the menu, we can do that in our main character. So this is what will trigger the pause to begin with. So I've created a function that will create the pause menu, set a reference to it, set it as hidden to begin with, and add it to the viewport. And we can call that function on begin play, just so that our menu has been created. So we can do begin play, and we can say show pause menu. Then on our input action, we can take advantage of the fact that it will be hidden or shown. So if we just delete this to begin with, we can take our menu widget here, just make sure that it is valid. And then from the menu widget, we can get its visibility. And we can switch on the values. So to begin with, it will be hidden, and that means we want to show it. So if it is hidden here, we can get our menu widget, and we can say set visibility to visible. And we can set the game to be paused at that point. Will be true. This will then show the menu, and in that menu we can control whether the cursor is being shown and what the input mode is. And based on the input mode, it will determine whether or not the input action will still be able to be triggered. So if we go to our menu again, and each one of these is just a button with a text on it. And if you click on any button, you can then click on the event to create an event for it. The first thing we need to do is to decide how we are going to change the input mode using our setup. And the way that we will do it is we'll take advantage of the fact that we are changing the visibility status of our widget. And we can do this either in the tutorial character or we can do it in the widget itself. And I think we'll do it in the widget today. So the one thing we will do is take advantage of the ability to bind to visibility changes. So if you right click and type in bind event to on visibility changed, we can call that on initialized. So this will be triggered only once. And from here, we can create an event. So visibility changed. From here, again, we can switch on the value that comes through. So switch on slate visibility. And in essence, if it is now visible, it means that the menu is being shown. So we can set the correct input mode and the cursor visibility as well. So on visible, we can say get player controller. Or we can say set show mouse cursor, and this one will be true. We can also, from the player controller, set the input mode. So set input mode. And we have three options available here: game and UI, game only, or UI only. And depending on which one, it will determine whether or not the input actions which are set up in our character can be triggered or not. In essence, if we use input mode UI only, those input actions will not fire. Whereas if we use game and UI or game only, they will fire. But we will do just input mode UI only so that they don't fire in the player if we press the P key when the menu is being shown. And then we can set that to be connected there. On the widget to focus, we can leave that as empty at the moment. And we can compile that. So that should then show the mouse cursor and the input mode. What we'll then want to do is, if we go back to our designer, we can click on our Unpause button. And if we go down to the bottom on the onClicked, if you click that, it will then create an event for you that will fire when you press the button. And here what we can do is we can take advantage of that visibility change again. So we can just say set visibility to hidden. That will then call our visibility changed. And if it goes back to hidden, we can hide the mouse cursor. So show mouse cursor is false. And we can change the input mode back to game only. So we should be able to use all our inputs to play our game. And again, we can flush inputs if we want to, so that nothing just goes through. We also need to unpause the game at this point as well, because when we hide the menu, the game should start playing again. And again, we have access to that same node, set game paused, and we set that to false. So we compile that, save it, go back to our game when we play. So again, everything starts. I press P, it pauses, we get our menu. The P key will not unpause it here because of our input mode. But if I press on the unpause, we should be able to go back to our game and play it. And that should be repeatable. Pause, unpause, and everything should do just as we expect it to. So that sets up the beginnings of our menu to pause and unpause. If you wanted to be able to still use the input action P key to pause and unpause even when the menu was showing, we would just have to put a different input mode here. So instead of input mode UI only, you would drag across and use set input mode game and UI. Compile that, and then go back to your tutorial character. And this time, if we press the input action and the menu is showing, all we have to do is say set visibility to hidden. And again, that will then trigger the visibility change here, which will trigger this to set the game as being unpaused. So we can go back to our third person, we play. And when I press P, the menu is showing. And if I press P again, we can still use the input action to show or unshow it, as well as using the button. So both of those would work just as we expected. So again, using the correct input mode allows you to control whether or not the input actions are being triggered or not when the menu is being shown. The next thing we will look at is how to quit a game. So if we go back to our menu, we have a quit game button here. So we can click on the quit game, go to the on clicked here. And again in Unreal, there is a node which is given to us that is basically called quit game. So we can click on that. And here you can put in your specific player controller if there is more than one. You can choose the type of quit preference, whether to quit completely or to move it to the background. And again, an option to ignore platform restrictions. But if I connect that together, go back, and then if we play, so again, if I press P, our menu comes up, and I click on the quit button, the game will quit. We could tie the quit to a specific input action if we wanted to, just by creating a new input action. Maybe call that IA quit. And then we'll just need to add that to our input mapping context. We are using the default input mapping context that comes with the third player template. So we can open that, go to our mappings, add a new one, and use our IA quit that we've created. We could bind this to any key, so we could just choose Q. But sometimes you might want to bind it to the escape key. The problem with the escape key is that when you're playing in Pi, it already quits the game, in which case this would never get called. But there are changes you can make to test that out. So we'll click on this and press escape. So this will now be bound to the escape key. What we then need to do is to open our editor settings. So if I open those, and if we just type in escape, so by default on the play world stop, escape is the shortcut, which would take precedence over the IA quit that we've created. We could just change this to shift escape. Close that. And then if we go back to our BP tutorial character, we can get our IA quit. And when that is triggered, we can just say quit game. And again, just to make sure that that is working, what we could do is maybe do a print statement. Just say quit game. Maybe put in a little delay there so we can actually see it. Compile, save. So if we now play, the game starts to play. If I press the escape, we should get a message in the top left saying quit game, and then 2 seconds later it should quit. So I press escape, we get the quit game in the top left, 2 seconds later it quits. So that shows an easy way of using the escape key to test out your game just by changing the shortcut settings in the editor preferences. And again, it's the play world that we want to change. The next thing to look at is how to restart a level. So if we click on our restart button and go to on clicked, there are 2 ways that you can do this. So using the restart button, one option is to just open the level again. So there is a node open level, and you can do that either by name, or you can do open level by object reference. The issue with both of these is you obviously need to know the name of the level you want to open, essentially to restart. So if we just do the open level by object reference, and we know that the name is actually third person map, so we could enter that here, or we could look for the built-in reference. Click on that, and just connect it up. We compile, go back and play, and then we get our menu. If I click on restart, it will restart the entire game. And it will do so by opening the level that we have specified again, so that we can play it from its default position. There is another way of doing it using a node. So if you right click and do restart and then turn off context sensitive, there is a restart game node that is available, but you notice that the target is game mode. And by default, our game mode is actually of game mode base rather than game mode. So we could create a new game mode. We go to our tutorial, right click, blueprint class. The default that comes with the template is a game mode base, and that has limited nodes available. We drop down the menu and type in game mode. We should get access to the game mode subclass. So we can click on that, select, call that game mode tutorial. And we can set this as being our game mode. So we can click that there and then just change our default pawn classes to our tutorial character. If we go back to our menu and we say get game mode, this will give us the default game mode that we are using, which is a game mode base object reference. We would have to cast this to game mode, which is the class that we want to use with the restart option on it. From there, we can drag off and type in restart. And even with context sensitive, we should get the restart game node. And this will restart the game at the level which is currently running. So if we put this in here, compile, save, and play. And again, if we just get our menu up and I press restart, it will restart everything. So we can do this without needing to know the name of the level that we want to restart, as it should restart the level that is currently running. And again, you could tie this to an input action key if you wanted to. The last thing to look at is how we can reset our level. In other words, if we wanted to perhaps just reset the health on all of our enemies, as you can see by the widgets above their heads, without having to restart the level, how could we go about doing that? So if we go back to our menu, and we notice that we have a reset button in that menu. So we can click on the button, go to the on clicked. And the way that this could work is that by using the game mode, there is a reset level option. So you type in reset level, and this will give you the reset level. And if you hover over it, it will tell you that this is an overridable function that will reset the game state while you remain in the same map. And it will be called on all of the actors in the level except the game mode and the controllers. So we can try using this. So we'll connect that. And once we've called the reset level, we can then set the visibility to hidden to remove the menu. We can compile that. And the way that this overridable function works is that when you call reset level, if you go to any actor in your level, and we'll go to our enemies that we are spawning, in the override, there is an on reset overridable event. And this will tell you that it will reset the actor to its initial state without reloading. So this gets called when we call reset level. And we want to reset our health. So we can simply get our health, reset it to its default value, which is 100. And then I can just update the health widget to show that. Then compile, save. So if I play again and allow for some of these enemies to be spawned, you can see that their health is going down on their widget bars as the game is playing. And if I pause and I press reset, their health will go back up to 100 and then start to reduce again. But I've got no control of any player character, and whether this is how it's meant to work or not, your player character seems to disappear when you do the reset level. So for instance, if I go to our outliner here and I type in BP tutorial, you will see that there is no BP tutorial player character on the level after we reset. So that's something that we have to address. So if we go back to our menu here, what we need to do is take advantage of another node that is available on the game mode. And that node allows us to restart the player character. So if you drag off, there is a restart player node. There is a restart player at player start or restart at transform. So if we want our player to restart with the same transform that he had before the level was reset, we can choose that option. We then just need to keep a reference to this transform. So we can get the player character, we can get the actor transform, and we can promote that to a variable, player transform. And we can do that right at the start. We can then call the reset level. We can then call the restart player at transform. So we can put that in here. And we can get our player transform variable that we've stored. And then we can call set visibility. And if there's any issues, we could put a little delay in here if we needed to. We also need to set the player controller reference. So get player controller, and we can plug that in there. We can then compile, save, and go back to our editor, play, allow some of these enemies to spawn, and their health will start to go down. And we can pause the menu, and we press reset. They should all get reset, and we still remain with a player character at the same location where we triggered the reset. So the way this seems to work is that the reset function override does not get called on the player character itself, but on all of the other actors. And the player character seems to disappear, so you do have to restart it. And you can choose to restart it at a player start or give it a specific transform. And then everything should work as you expect. So essentially our menu should be fully working. We can pause and unpause. We can reset. We can restart the entire level. And we can pause and we can quit the game. So I hope that helps show how you can use these essential game flow nodes and techniques in your games.